Hi, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Transforming External Training, Lessons from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, presented by Litmos. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us where you're signing in from. And we'll be waiting for more attendees to trickle in, but we'll get started with just a few housekeeping notes to help you get familiar with our webinar software. So you'll notice that you're in this webinar console and there's a chat window to your right. You can use this chat window to introduce yourselves or to comment on the topics that are being discussed in today's webinar. And the Q&A window is located just below that chat window. And you can use that Q&A window to send questions throughout the presentation. And myself and the rest of the Litmos team will do our best on the back end to respond to those questions in real time. However, we'll also be saving a few of your questions for a live Q&A portion toward the end of this presentation. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be sent to the email that you registered with, so keep an eye on your inboxes. And now that I've gone over some housekeeping notes, I will pass it over to today's panelists so that they can introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jill Stefaniak. I'm the Chief Learning Officer with Litmos, and I work with our team to ensure that all of our design decisions that go into our products are grounded in learning science. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Jill. Todd Lefkowitz. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Litmos, and I look after everything post-sale, which includes professional services, tech support, success and renewals. And I have the privilege of working with customers like Richard every day. So Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Todd. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Kerridge. I'm the strategy and architecture lead for Hewlett Packard Enterprise's customer services education division. So I look at things like everything from the business strategy and the technical strategy and worry about how to marry those two on kind of a daily basis.
Right. So Richard, you've been a customer now for quite some time. And as we consider, sort of the myriad of use cases that learning management platforms provide, they're generally broken into, sort of two categorical use cases, the internal and the external. And for today, let's focus on the external training use case. Now, you've built quite a dynasty at HPE. So share a little bit about what you've done to create your empire.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. So we've been in the customer education business at HPE here for almost 50 years now. So predates my time. I've been in the business here for 25 years in education services in various different forms. Over that time, we've trained millions of customers over the life cycle of our existence. Since we've been with Litmos, since 10 years now. Live on our platform, and 2 years before that working on various bits and pieces with you. So we've built that over a few decades now, gone through many different iterations of it. We've bounced around different parts of our organization, but we've always been a for-profit part of the company, running and providing customer training to our clients, really to help them get the kind of skills that they need. And with Litmos, we've been as you can see from the numbers here, running the whole of our customer training business on the Litmos ecosystem for that 10 years, training over 500,000 customers on that platform, lots of e-learning transactions through there. And most recently, so over the last 5 years, we've been running and building our HPE Digital Learner subscription offer. That's really the big change in the last 5 years for us, where we've really tried to expand our pedigree of instructor-led training and add to it that on-demand learning element through our digital learner subscription, so people have got training all the time. We've been running that now. That's grown really, really well. We're up to about 20% of our total business is coming in through those subscription revenues running on top of Litmos now.
Amazing.
Yeah, these are super impressive metrics, Richard, and I'm sure our attendees are really looking forward to learning more about how you've achieved such great success with external training, which is one of the reasons why we really want to dig in today during our webinar, just the evolution of your HPE training program. And so for our attendees today, when you look at, here's a visual of some of the main challenges that HPE has faced with external training. And we'd love to kind of dig into what some of these challenges have been and how you've overcome them, how they've influenced some of your decisions to move your training operations to Litmos.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. We've got, as you can see from these things on the visual, this is just kind of a selection of the things that we look at. We've got a whole raft of different requirements, but these ones we picked out just to show you because they're different from the kind of things that you would see in L&D or in partner training businesses or in partner training organizations. It's really, our focus is really on making sure that we can operate in a world where our learners can choose to take our training. Remember, in customer training business, very different from compliance or internal training. That's an equally important function, of course, but it's a different play for customer education. You need to provide stuff that customers want to take, that's easy for them to consume when they want to do it. It's not a lot of difference in that way from learners in L&D world, but there are elements of making sure that you can run that business effectively and efficiently, because you can only provide the training to your customers that they want to take and that you can afford to provide. So we really focus on making sure we get that kind of the data in our platform, making sure that we've got good centralized decisions, that we can manage the commercial elements of our business, and that we can really dig into the learning analytics and reporting around that business, just to make sure that we can do things in a competitive way, keep up with the market, and make sure that we are always reacting to that very dynamic industry that we're in.
Terrific. So I'm sure that for the audience, a lot of individuals that have joined today can familiarize with both the challenges and the priorities that you just mentioned, Richard. So if we go to the next slide, I'd love for the audience to sort of chime in and let us know in the chat, in the public chat, like what are the priorities that you focus on with respect to your L&D programs? And just take a minute to just list out some of the priorities that you guys have from the list that we have here on the screen. One, commercial complexity. We've got one from Aaron. Anybody else? Oh, it's a quiet group this morning. 8, difficulty measuring success. Okay, here we go. They're starting to come. All right. 5, 6, 8. Time constraints, misalignment with learning needs and the customer journey, lack of learning integration into product, lack of consistent analysis and reporting, value proposition for learners and customers, difficulty measuring success. Yeah, I mean, look, this is not too inconsistent with what I hear from the engagement that I have with customers day in, day out here at Litmos, and my ability to engage with so many different customers across so many different use cases.
Yeah. I also just think too, number 8, difficulty measuring success. That seems to be a challenge no matter where you're at, whether it's internal training, external training, really being able to identify metrics that are really going to help you ensure, to demonstrate that you're meeting those intended needs and purpose. So I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit more today as well. And I also see we had a few number 3s and 4s. Number 3 and 5. I just kind of want to briefly mention. We see a lot where just trying to engage and motivate our learners, it's really important. Learners are engaged. We're all engaged in our own training when we see the value and utility in something, if we see the relevance and how this is going to help me do my day-to-day job and responsibilities. And I think I see a few 5s popping up. We have those challenges with those time constraints for learner application. How often do you go to training and you actually have time to just think and digest what you've just learned? Half the time we go to training and then it's rush. I got to get caught up on everything I missed while I was in training. And so as we dig into these, we're going to be digging into all of these today and hearing from Richard about how HPE has dealt with some of these challenges and roadblocks along the way, and what are some things that they've put into their infrastructure to help them be successful.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Dr. Jill. One roadblock I'm interested to dive into, Richard, is, how does HPE and how do you and the team deal with commercial complexity specifically. You guys are a big operation. Curious as to what sort of details you can impart on the audience here in terms of how you navigate things like pricing, discounting, and localization complexities, as an example.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's so much to dig into with the commercial complexity. But just to pick a few things that I think we really make sure we try and get right. I think you've got to really understand your marketplace. You've got to understand from a pricing and discount perspective what adds value and how much value you're adding, what your competition is. So there's some normal business strategy things that go in there as well. But one of the other thing that I think kind of is less obvious is around how you globalize and localize your business, right? So in an L&D context, we know how important things like translation is, but we also, in a multicultural global world, we've also got all kinds of things around learning styles, making sure that people can feel comfortable in their learning environment. So one of the things that we do here is we take Litmos and we obviously use the localization features that are built in. And we love the flexibility in the fact that we can customize the UI. So we'll put it in our own branding, or we'll put it in our customers' branding. We'll put it in their language. We'll add their messaging into the platform as well, so that the customer can see an element of their own self and their own audience in what we're providing to them. And I think that often gets missed in some of the commercial aspects. And we tend to focus very heavily on orders and revenue and margin in a commercial business, and those things are incredibly important. But I think getting those fundamentals right around making sure the customer feels at home in their training, making sure that it's appropriate for their marketplace and for the culture that you're working in is incredibly important if you want people to buy your training.
Yeah. One thing you brought up when we were talking before this is the difference between localization and globalization. Can you just kind of fill the audience in on your perspective on that?
Yeah, so for globalization, localization, so localization tends to just talk about putting things into the right locale, the right language, and those kind of things. And those things are really important. And generally what we see in large L&D organizations is that they will figure that they'll focus on localization. They generally have corporate rules that mandate certain languages or certain styles in their training. In a global space, you've got a number of other things to talk about as well. So if you're, the example we always give is quite a boring one, for example, or two that I'll give quickly, but they're important to you. So for example, if you're offering training in Poland and Germany, you've got two different cost bases in those marketplace. So you can't just provide a price in euros. You need to be able to put a price in Polish euros and in German euros, because you need to be able to account for the economics of those markets. So you need to have systems that are aware of that difference. That's a classic difference in a kind of globalization and a localization. Another one, for example, in the world that we deal with, a lot of the world speaks international English. So if we're running a training course in Mumbai and one in London, we'll have different joining instructions, different codes for our parking garages, different instructions on how to join the campus. The language is still English for both of those notifications. So it's not enough just to have the ability to take a notification and turn it from French into English. I've got to be able to localize and globalize that for my audience as well. And that can be everything from style of writing to specifics of logistics. So there's all kinds of things in there that make you think about a global business in a different way beyond just getting the currency and the language right.
Yeah, I think that's a salient point, Richard. When I ran global training for RSA Security, I remember I created some posters to send out to the offices, and they were red, and they went to one of our offices in China, and people had a fit because that color culturally was not. And I was just so naive to the fact that something like that would be so culturally insensitive. So, I mean, it is super important to account for that. So let's talk about cost, right? I think sensitivity to cost is always going to be a high priority for any organization. How do you guys deal with this challenge?
Yeah, as you say, cost management is so important for any training function. Most training functions are either a cost center or a break even or a for profit, depending on what they're trying to do. In our world, we're a for profit, but all of them have that baseline of being able to make sure they can manage their costs. So making sure that we can track our costs, our variable costs in particular, is really important. We like that with Litmos. The way that the Litmos licenses its product means that we can really pitch the amount of capacity that we want, and we can also manage our variable costs, so we can essentially increase or handle our license capacity as we need to within that model. That's kind of really important for technical, for commercial businesses to be able to to match their cost structure to their seasonality. Right now in Europe, it's big holiday season, so we've got less work going on. So we try and variabilize much of our cost. We have a mix of regular and contract workforce, and also we want to make sure that we can see all this stuff in our analytics. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is creating value, and then we can justify those costs. That's the other key piece to this. So keeping a close eye on the metrics, really, really important for us as well, to keep the costs low, but also to justify the costs that we are incurring.
And I know in L&D, scheduling is always a challenge for us. How does HPE deal with this from a customer training perspective?
Yeah, it's an increasingly time sensitive world that we live in, and so we use a blended approach to that, Jill. We make sure that we mix both e-learning and instructor-led models into what we do. Increasingly, we're trying to space out the instructor-led modules as well. We came from a world where, you 10, 15 years ago, you'd get on a plane or you'd train, you'd fly, and you go to somewhere for 4 or 5 days, and it would be an all-inclusive, like, training away day or away week. That world is rapidly vanishing as a regular part of business. We still see that, but we try and make sure that we can space those things out so that, it's like every other afternoon for 2 weeks or something, just to try and allow you to insert it into the rhythm of what you're doing. And also models that we're experimenting with that have been around for a while now, but not so much in the customer world, of things like flipped classroom, which has been around for a little while, just trying to really see how we can use some of those things that see if we can translate things from K through 12 learning that we're seeing work well in university programs into the customer space. And finally, we also offer private events for our customers to allow them that kind of ultimate flexibility, so that they can choose the time and location of their training in a bit more of a granular way.
Now that's really helpful. Do you come across issues where there's time constraints that are impacting participants' abilities to participate in training? Do you have some tips for our members of our audience today on what some of those workarounds maybe, or what's worked well for you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to try and do that. So I think there's any silver bullet here. But one of the things that we're trying and continue to push for is to try and get training integrated more into the products, right? So the reason I say that is it tends to be that adults, as you all know, adults tend to be goal-oriented, adult learners tend to be goal-oriented. So it's not so much a problem of getting people the time to take training. When we as adults and workers encounter problems that are in the way of us, we desperately want to solve them. So we will make time to acquire knowledge. So at that point, it's about making sure that it's easy to find. So putting it in the eye line or in the workflow of the learner, something L&D has been talking about for years in terms of training in the flow of work. We try and do that as well, to try and make sure that our training can be surfaced at the point of need, ideally in the product. Now, we don't always get that right, and that's where we try and make sure that we have loads of other strategies like the AI tools in Litmos, etc., to aid that discoverability. Just really try and make sure that what time the learner does put aside for learning is spent taking learning and not searching for it.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that we've mentioned, and it showed up on one of those challenges, is really just helping learners to see the value and the relevance of the training that they're experiencing and encountering. And I think that's challenging with any learning audience. I think it becomes even more challenging for L&D professionals when we're dealing with external training, because we know our customers have a lot of different unique and nuanced needs. How does HPE frame value for training with your customers, knowing that you have people coming in with different goals, different objectives for what they're seeking out in their training opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question. We split down our value proposition into 2 pieces, if you like. So when we're talking about the customer training, we're really talking about the company that's buying the training and the learners within that company who are taking the training. And we need to deliver value for both. So for the customer itself, we're really talking about highlighting the skills for that company, about making sure that they have the skills that they need. We're in the midst of a technical skills crisis that we haven't seen the like of before. So it's incredibly important that we highlight to customers that they are very likely, we estimate and IDC reports these kind of numbers, about 90% of customers are running into technical skill problems today. So it's incredibly important we highlight to our customers that when they're buying our products and services, HPE, our compute, our storage, our network solutions, they're trying to get an outcome with that. And skills or lack of skills is going to get in the way. So providing the training as it's needed to people through subscriptions and a variety of mixed modalities throughout the life cycle of that customer's journey, is going to be incredibly important to them to make sure that their staff have access to those skills. It's basically faster time to market, faster time to value for our customer by removing knowledge and skills roadblocks. And then for the individuals themselves, what's in it for them? Why would they personally make the time? This can help build their own personal knowledge base, their own personal brand, build their careers. And we let people, we'll offer high stakes and low stakes credentialing. So we'll issue digital badges that are resume worthy through Litmos, so that people can show that they're acquiring things and that they can demonstrate that they've added that value to themselves as an individual as well. So those two value propositions are really important.
Yeah, I love the use of badges.
Yeah, I think, Scott, in the age of social media, social proof, I think really helps, not only for the learners themselves from a career and both a personal gain perspective, but also for HPE as well.
Yeah, so, I think that's very true. And you see people more and more, we're seeing new hires coming to the workplace demanding that companies have decent education programs because they want to grow their careers. So it's really important that they can get that and then show that.
Yep, absolutely. So how do you think about measuring success of customer training?
Yeah, so customer training does have a few other measures. So we kind of focus on the underlying causal measures, really looking at what's our repeat business. Jill, you mentioned it. Engagement's really difficult, and that's a challenge across. It doesn't matter who you're training, kids through to adults, compliance through to customer. Getting engagement with training remains a challenge, especially in the very disconnected world we live in. So we want to look at those indicators of that engagement, like repeat business, frequency of learning, learner satisfaction, how much people are consuming their training credit balances and using their subscriptions on the individual learner level. But we also internally want to look on the links to the wider corporate value. So we're obviously an education business that sits in a much larger business, and we want to continue to demonstrate that value back to our bosses, the people who provide the funding for us to operate. And that's in terms of things like renewals, expansion, and support deflection on the products that we offer training for. So we make sure we have a raft of balanced measures that can address those two different value propositions that we talked about earlier.
Got it. And so when you talk about measurements, what reporting and analytics do you use to measure these metrics for success? And are there challenges that tend to arise when you think about these measurements?
Yeah, I think so. We take a mixture of homegrown and Litmos analytics today. So to measure that success and to look at things like KPIs, etc., we really make sure we bring all this out into our data lake. And we use the Litmos data subscription, the Litmos data subscription to do this. For us in a business, we want to see all our data in the round. So I think the key thing is to be able to combine the various pieces that we see. So we want to be able to look at things like how well our subscriptions are taking off in the market, but we also want to make sure that we can measure our orders and what our margin is. We talked about cost earlier. We've got to be able to track all those things together. So there's a wide basket of measures that we look in there. The challenges that we get are things like obtaining data. So I've worked with a number of different learning systems over the years, and you'd be probably not surprised at how difficult it can be to get data out of platforms and to combine it with others. And it's not that you don't want your learning management platform to do reporting. You absolutely need it to do those things. There are some reports that need to be done either for time reasons or even so that your end users can see them. And much of our customers want to see the reporting in Litmos to see how their learning programs are going. But we want to be able to do additional things like how much is this customer paid for their subscription? How long have they got left? How often do they repeat buy this stuff? And how does that correlate to their learning? And if they take more learning, do they raise less support tickets? I'm never going to be able to do that in my learning management platform. I just need it to play as a nice member of the ecosystem of platforms that we have in the company and provide its data freely and securely, if you like, in the right way to those different reporting systems. So those are some of the challenges: getting data, integrating it, building those kind of reports that we kind of run into.
You've used the word ecosystem a couple of times, and I love that. That comes up so often when we look at research in learning design and technology about systems thinking. And I think it's a great way to frame how you're approaching the Litmos platform. Thinking of it is that it's not just this mechanism to deliver training. It's really embracing it as this learning ecosystem to support a lot of different functions for customer training. And thinking about that, you've mentioned branding in this, and trying to provide opportunities for your customers to see themselves or to resonate with that training environment, with that ecosystem. And that kind of goes into my next question. We see a lot of challenges with personalization. Everyone wants content personalized for their unique needs. And that can be very challenging as L&D professionals. How much do we personalize it? Do we personalize it too much to the extent that it doesn't fit for anyone anymore? What are some of the ways that you're approaching personalization with your content, and how has HPE approached this challenge?
Yeah, and as I think you call a number of things, it's really difficult to get personalization right. I think that we're living at the beginning of an age, it feels, with AI coming in, where we will eventually start to see personalization be that much more readily available to us. But the way we deal with it now, within those kind of cost constraints that we have, right? We can't just build every different version of every content for everybody. So how do we do it now? Well, we take a wider view, a wider lens of this. So what we try and do with personalization is make sure that people can find the learning they want and select only the learning they want. So this is about doing things like providing skills tests so that people can understand where their skills gaps are, to reduce their scrap learning so they can find the learning that they want. Using tools like the AI capabilities in Litmos today is a great tool. So anything that helps with discovery allows the learner to kind of self-personalize. So we can organize our training in kind of learning paths that help people go through particular tasks. So we can be task oriented, we can be role oriented in the design of our learning paths, but then we can allow learners to select those, to favorite those, to put them into playlists, to find them through AI and add them to their dashboards by having conversational chats. Anything like that is going to help personalize their experience so they feel that they're getting something that's advice to them. So personalization doesn't just have to be in terms of the content for them. It can be in the way in which they discover that and the way in which they package and choose to learn. The other big thing we do is, we talked about a little bit earlier about branding that. So in Digital Learner, we offer a branded version of that platform, which customers can deploy as their own, right? So they can then access all of our core training through there. We can manage that in the same tenant, and the customer can bring their own training. So if we're running an AI skills class or a project for them, they might have some AI ethics training they want to bring that's built internally, and their own cybersecurity measures. So they'll want to combine their training. So that personalization thing, I think for now, is viewed through a very broad lens at the moment. And the nice thing is that we can do so much of that within the Litmos platform today.
So, Richard, I think with most programs, right, it's always a constant evolution and adaptation. But with your experience at HPE, I'm interested in understanding what insights you can provide to the audience on your top 3 external training best practices for global organizations who are looking to personalize or customize their approach.
Yeah, it's a great tee up from the last question, actually. I mean, just to reiterate that point, make sure you get your content strategy right for that audience. And that means right is going to change. That means you need a modularized strategy. And one of the nice things we see today in the Litmos platform is we can easily put our courses in there in a modular format, which allows us to recombine them, update them more quickly and easily. So making sure that you've got that personalization, modularization, maintenance headache under control right from day one is a really important thing. Secondly, I'd say making sure that your learning technology ecosystem supports that rich globalization feature set that we talked about earlier in the call, more than just languages, right? There's different communication templates, that ability to handle different pricing and work within the cultures and the marketplaces that you find yourself in, which is a different thing than working in an L&D world. And then lastly, I think, look at those things that you find, there's elements of the marketplace that you find that are going to be different. So culture, style, training preference. We find that we want to make sure, for example, if you look at the recent, we learned a huge amount, like most people did in training during COVID, about learning styles and preferences. So even with COVID being in the rearview mirror here now, we're still finding that cultural norms are reinforcing themselves. So we're finding in Japan, our training is going back to 80% face-to-face training. The Middle East is going back to face-to-face training in private offerings in different countries. So we're finding some of these things and understanding those marketplaces and making sure that your offer aligns to those marketplaces is particularly important.
And I think that also kind of goes hand in hand too with scaling, which, scaling learning is so important, and it can be especially challenging with customer training because sometimes the products we're creating training for aren't integrating those trainings into the user experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a big challenge for us. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a similar challenge to what we see in L&D departments, as you've mentioned, in integrating into the flow of work. In our case, we're really making sure that the customer has the ability to discover training at the point of need. So that's really our big thing, is about understanding where that point of learning need occurs in the workflow. Increasingly, the products that we're offering customers these days are cloud-based, have digital interfaces. So our ability to do that is getting greater, but it's a constant challenge because there's so many competing priorities in business units now and this is, again, not a specific to customer training. I know it's true of all training across the organization, is getting our voice heard as the people who do training to understand the importance and the value of that is difficult given those competing priorities.
Competing priorities, huh? I know no one on the call has ever dealt with competing priorities, for sure.
But given a lot of the wins that you've shared with us earlier today, Richard, we know that HPE's Digital Learner Program has achieved a lot of success despite these challenges. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been 5 years since we started running it. It is a critical part of our training strategy. So before we did that, we were running small, independent, standalone e-learning courses that were broadly equivalents for tried to be a kind of poor equivalents of the instructor-led training that we really wanted to keep to provide. And we offer a very healthy instructor-led business today, but we noticed, due to some of those challenges we've been talking about already, that just offering instructor training isn't going to get it done. 30 years ago, people would come and buy a computer system from us. You could only get the training from us. We only trained 2 or 3 people in the IDP department per customer, and they only came back for training when they bought the next version of the hardware 3 to 5 years later. That world is completely gone in the tech industry. We're issuing 4 or 5 software functionality changes a day into some of our cloud platforms, and that's much, much higher frequency in some other businesses as well. So how do we exist in that kind of world? Our answer was to really bring in that digital learner piece, make sure that we can allow as many people as possible to have access to training as they need it on demand, and then also build their own value. As you see that we've talked about the open badges piece in there as well, but we want to provide that certification from people who just want to learn something to solve a problem now, to people who want to grow right the way through to showing industry certifications to really build their career. So when we looked at this, started 5 years ago, we had this hugely complex enterprise thing in mind. But what you see now from Digital Learner is a much simpler, learner-focused subscription model.
So, Richard, when we think about the concept of simplicity, which I think is really critical for both the administration and the learner themselves, I don't think we should assume that all learning institutions or entities are going to be large and complex. What advice would you have for growing teams looking to launch external training?
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams, we talk with a lot of companies that want to understand how they can extract that commercial value from the training that they offer their customers. And I think the 2 things I would say: really understand the changes to your processes that you're going to need to make and to your financial model in offering customer training. It's not more or less difficult than running a good L&D function. Absolutely, that's a critical piece of anyone's business, but it does bring in some different challenges around managing orders and revenue, margins, discount, pricing, the commercial realities of operating a business. So make sure you can do those things. Make sure your systems can do those things. Make sure your people are ready to do those, and that your partner's ready to do it. Look for any bottlenecks that you might find in that value chain that you have in your existing system. And the second thing I would say is, start small. You don't have to build a 1 million person, 85 country training business in one day. We certainly didn't. And I think you can start small, and you can reflect on staff and customer feedback, and you can adjust as you go along and really react to what you see out there.
As an L&D professional, I know getting leadership buy-in is critical to the success of any training program, and especially for L&D professionals or teams that are being tasked with designing external training for the first time, just trying to figure out how are they approaching, how to generate new revenue streams for their organizations. For members on our webinar today, if they're What tips or recommendations do you have if you're a small L&D team or you're an L&D professional that's never done this before? What are some recommendations you may have for them to help them bridge the gap between learning and business goals to help gain buy-in and traction within their organizations?
No, it's a great question. A very common thing that we find within L&D teams that are looking to extend out into the extended enterprise and really start to monetize some of that value they have. The good news here is that you're used to working with sponsors who are worried about managing your bottom line with L&D, and that's obviously a very important thing to do. But the thing you need to bring into the conversation is to emphasize the value that training has to your customers. So we've been running our training business for a long time. We run it as a profit center, and it is a profitable business. So it's a very good business to be in. Customers do value skills, they do value knowledge, they do value the outcomes that they get from that. So I would emphasize that is that a good customer business pays for itself. Even if you run a break-even model, this isn't something that's going to substantially increase your cost model. In fact, it's probably broken if it's costing you a lot of money to run your customer training business. You're not providing the value that you need. So when you get it right that way, your sponsor shouldn't be too scared about that. In fact, there's potential value and profit for them in doing so. And I think the second piece there is to really find those sponsors who care about the things that customers get from a good customer training program. So they might not care about customer training revenue in a multi-billion organization, but they do care about things like customer loyalty, customer satisfaction, renewal rates, churn rates, call deflections, support costs. All businesses care about those kind of things. And you can show direct correlation between customers that are trained and those good outcomes for your sponsors. So find those sponsors who care about those outcomes and get them bought in and get them as being advocates to your argument.
Love it. I couldn't agree more with those points, Richard. When you think about digital learning programs, what are the sort of headwinds and challenges or threats that have you most concerned?
Yeah, I think there's a number that keep us there, but the ones that I would pick right now as the main ones, I think relevancy is a really important thing for us. You know, we're seeing such a fast rate of change as always in certainly in the sector that we work in tech. Making sure we keep our content fresh and focused on the required topics, really, really important for us. We want to make sure it's back to that customer value, right? We need to have the topics that people need to learn, and that's changing. And then discoverability. I think we live in an age where there's never been more training available. In Digital Learner, we have over 12,500 courses available on the platform. That's impossible to browse, right? We've got to make sure that our learners don't get lost in that increasingly large amount of content. We want to make sure that those things can really be easily discovered. And then, Jill, you mentioned it earlier with, personalization and adaptation. We know that although we take a broad lens today, we're still not getting it done as well as we should do on personalization as an industry, I think. And we're there to, that goal of being able to adapt our content exactly to the specific learning needs of the specific learner with a specific goal and a specific moment of need is something that the industry continues to struggle with. And I know that we make great strides in this area. So making sure that we get that personalization adaptation right helps solve a number of things we talked about, including value, including time allocated training. So those are the things we constantly think about.
Mm-hmm. Do you think some of those challenges can be mitigated with AI? If you could talk a little bit about, how's HPE, embracing adaptive learning or AI technology as it relates to your external training?
Absolutely. I mean, HPE as a company is all in on AI, as you might imagine. We're a massive vendor of the compute and storage and networking components to do that. We're a big NVIDIA partner. We actually teach our customers on AI. So we run entire AI training sessions for data scientists right through to end users on how to build entire data centers to build AI factories. So we want to make sure in our training that we're also taking advantage of that. And one of the things we're delighted to see is that Litmos is really leading with that as well from its training perspective. We adopted the new AI Litmos chat feature earlier in the year, right at the beginning of the year, in fact, and that's really helping with discovery that we talked about in some of those challenges. So really bringing that piece in. I think for relevancy, AI analytics and helping to mine insights from our support data is incredibly important. So HPE takes millions of support tickets a year. They're in all kinds of languages, all kinds of mediums. it's impossible to mine that data by hand. So we're looking at AI to help us mine that data, mine our support tickets, mine our customer interview transcripts, to really understand the topics that are bothering them, to make sure that the training we're producing matches to the issues that our customers are really seeing in the real world. So that tying in, that tightening of the relevancy link, AI can really help us discover those insights and themes from our data. And I think for adaptation, we're already looking now at AI teaching assistants, right, for our classroom instructor-led classes as a way to help adapt the training in all of our modalities. So I think we've got, in Litmos now, we've got the AI assistant there that can help you chat with your content. You can rediscover it, you can recap content. And we're also looking for our instructor-led classes for our students to be able to do the same things there, to chat with their content, to be able to come back and review the content and chat with the instructor transcript after the session is done. That's really important for us. And of course, we're looking forward to many more adaptive features coming out from Litmos. We know we've got a strong roadmap there. We love sitting on the product advisory body, and we're a big voice cheering for that, and looking forward to more enhancements as they come out.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us, Richard. We have quite a few questions coming in, so I thought I'd hop back on and send some your way to discuss.
Sure.
This has been such an insightful conversation, and our attendees have a few questions. Noel is asking, when you mention in-product training, what tools are you using to get that in front of learners?
Good question. So a lot of our stuff today is homegrown, right? So we have played around and looked at things like DAP, so digital adoption platforms. So there are tools we can do those. We've found, and it might be just us, we've found that those work incredibly well with an internal audience. So we'll use a lot of, in the flow of work training will be in DAPs, where we're merging in product help with that. When it comes to something like you say, like our HPE's GreenLake cloud platform, which is a completely custom bit of software, what we do is we work with the in-product help people to make sure that they include hooks out. So we do signposting is essentially our answer to that. So we'll make sure we put signposts and hooks into our in-product help to actually bring them out into Litmos. Now, they might not know that they're in Litmos. They may just see, hey, here's the answer to your immediate question. There's a deeper set of knowledge in this. If you're interested, click here, right? And that will then load up the Litmos training course seamlessly. We use the SSO connections and the deep linking connections into Litmos, bring that up in a separate window, and then they'll be able to take a course module. And that's, of course, recorded back in Litmos so that we can give them better recommendations next time. So the answer is Litmos, but it's also that we are using and working carefully with the product teams themselves to use whatever they're using, even if it's a DAP.
That's awesome. I have two questions that are sort of related. It's about free training or complimentary training versus paid. So it's kind of a two-parter. Kengle Yap says, how do you encourage customers to purchase training programs rather than offering them as a complimentary services bundled with product purchases? And then Judy Zeitzman says, our product is an application used for inventory optimization, and we provide free training to our customers because if they don't know how to use it, they'll churn, and we'll lose income. So I believe that the training being free means the customers aren't prioritizing it. So how do we get them to complete it? So it's kind of two sides of the same coin. Do you have any advice for Judy and Kang?
Yeah, there's a lot of psychology that goes into this as well, right? We've seen in L&D, this idea of free training can inadvertently people to ascribe low value to the training, right, if it's free. So we know if we put that one to one side, I think there's an interesting concept in both of those questions that we haven't talked about yet, which is in your commercial training, you need to have a decent free to fee strategy, right? You need to have if you see many custom businesses, ourselves included, have a freemium strategy. So if you look at the life cycle of a customer, many of us on this call will have complex products. We're certainly that true. So there's an element of knowledge transfer and training that needs to happen before the sale. And then there's some fundamentals that you want everyone to have access to, that one of your questioners that certainly put into their question. So I think it's about making sure that you get fundamentals. I think it's important that your businesses understand there's no such thing as free training. I prefer to call it free at the point of consumption, right? Everyone who created that training still had the same cost per minute as all the stuff we do for customers, and everyone got paid. It's whether you include it or not. And I think it's not a black and white binary question here. I would say the answer is both. You want to make sure that you identify those fundamentals that really value or really get in the way of customer adoption and really drive churn and that drive high support costs. And you'll find in our business, we found that it was very basic fundamental stuff: setup, config, login, the basic things. Make sure, I think it's very sensible to take an approach like you would take to support. So this idea, we talk about it as like warranty for the people, right? As well as warranty for the hardware. So warranty will cover basic break, fix, product issues that you've got. But if you want to learn at depth and you want to dig into details that not everybody needs, that's where your for fee training comes in, to take people to the intermediate level, take them to specialist areas through certification paths that you don't want all of your customers to take. You only want people in those roles where that matches it. So that we find provides the perfect balance of providing training at the right price point. So no one wants to buy training when they haven't bought your product yet. So it makes sense to include that up front. But it also makes sense during the cycle to do things to deflect calls and onboarding issues. But it makes sense to not make other people pay for embedded training that they might not need. Sorry, long answer, but yeah, it's a really
amazing. I mean, it's nuanced questions, right? And I think you wove both of those questions into your answer very well. And I hope that enlightened the folks who asked about it. Well, we are coming up on time. I wanted to thank you all for having this conversation. If you have any closing words, thanks for joining us, and thanks to everybody who signed in to watch the conversation.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Thank you for our participants. Richard, always terrific to have the ability to engage with you, and for the audience, again, really appreciate you guys attending and asking the questions. And our aspiration was that this was helpful and imparted a bit of knowledge for you all.
Thanks, everybody. Jill, sorry.
No, I just said thanks, everybody.
Jinx. So just a reminder to everybody who's signed on, this webinar is recorded, so we'll be sure to send that recording to you all later today via the emails that you registered with. So thanks, everybody. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.